Michael Jenkins is a lead software engineer at a leading company in entertainment. He has experience with Linux and Windows systems administration, as well as process automation and technical writing. Now, as far as languages, he's fluent in Bash, Perl, and Python. Plus, he's familiar with cloud technologies like Amazon Web Services, the Google Cloud Platform, and Microsoft Azure. How's it going, Michael?
It's going great, Ray. I'm so glad to be here talking with you today.
Tell me a little bit about your education.
I had the fortunate experience to go to a magnet high school in Atlanta, Georgia. And the focus there was engineering and applied technology. So even in high school, I was getting hands-on experience with what was the cutting edge computing at the time, IBM XT, AT computers. And from there, I went to Iowa State University, where I
Mhm.
majored in computer engineering. Really enjoyed the computer engineering curriculum. I did transfer a couple times.
Mhm.
I also enjoyed journalism, so I actually did leave computer engineering and go to journalism. I came back to computer engineering after a couple semesters to finish out my engineering degree. But really, it was just a love for technology and wanting to learn as much as I could about building computer
Mhm.
systems that really sort of drove my education.
With technology changing so much, what sort of things did you learn in college that you think are still going to be something useful today?
The programming languages that I learned in college,
Hmm.
they're not popular now, like Lisp and Scheme. I mean, God bless you folks that if you're watching and you program in Lisp. One of the key takeaways that I sort of carry from my college days is the ability to learn. You're given an opportunity to absorb that information, and then you're prompted with a challenge or some sort of problem. And you have
Hmm.
to take what you've learned about that topic to solve that problem. And that's the same throughout your career, no matter how experienced you are as an engineer, as a developer.
That's a really good point. I think you do start learning some of that in school, working through a lot of projects, opportunities to work with other people, and it kind of teaches you how to deal with people who have different styles. Now, you started working with things like integrated circuits using Perl, Bash, and Makefile scripts. Tell me a little bit about what took you from there and pointed you into the direction that you're in right now.
My junior and senior years, I started studying microelectronic fabrication. And I really, really got hooked on it. Basically, I learned how to take silicon wafers and use chemical processes to imprint transistors on these silicon wafers and make computer chips. I was more interested in the circuits and the connections and the wires and everything inside the computer than I was more about the software itself. And I still got the first silicon wafer that I've made. I've
Wow.
got it kind of stored away so I could look at it from time to time and just reflect on that. My first job out of college was actually using programming languages to define integrated circuits. They're called application specific integrated circuits, or ASICs. So
Hmm.
I was using a programming language called VHDL to describe the logic that is eventually implemented in a circuit. But I started to also apply this programming experience that I had picked up. And where those two met was in a process called synthesis, or circuit synthesis
Hmm.
and circuit validation, where me as the circuit designer or the circuit verifier would run these processes against the code.
Hmm.
And a lot of that was powered from the command line. So I was able to write bash scripts and Perl scripts and make files that automated a lot of those processes. So that's really where I kind of got the joy out of, like, okay, I can do the circuit stuff, but it's not all the, so I don't know if you've seen pictures of people in an Intel lab or something like that, where they've
Yes,
got
the
the
bunny
bunny
suits.
suit.
Yeah, that's right.
I was learning more about scripting and, automating. I became more efficient automating the synthesis and the verification of the design than doing the actual design itself.
Hmm.
So that led me to a role where I was actually called an application engineer. So I became responsible for setting up the Linux systems that other engineers used. This was circa, let's just call it 2001,
Hmm.
2002, somewhere around there. And I was actually doing what we would call now DevOps work. I took my experience as an application engineer supporting circuit designers, and I was able to take that into a role where I was actually supporting mechanical engineers. The key thing, though, was using scripting and automation to help
Hmm.
these engineers be more efficient. I wish I
Hmm.
had been more keen to jump onto this idea of DevOps. As I stopped supporting mechanical engineers, I found myself in a role where I was again supporting designers. This time they were actually web designers. They were using Java basically to design web portals and applications that worked on web platforms like Apache and Nginx. The same thread, I should say, that remained constant was automation. And at this time, the birth of the cloud, quickly being able to provision resources. Those were the things that really drew me into the space that I'm in now, because I mean, I remember days where if I wanted to set up a new computer system or, a group of servers, I would have to put in a purchase order and I might have to wait a couple months before those computers showed up. Then when they showed up, I have to unbox them. I have to put them in a rack. I have to wire them up. I have
Wow.
to get power. It's just basically all these things that you have to do to acquire this compute resource. But then when I started to learn about the cloud, and I'm like, okay, I could just log into this website and click a button and I get 20 servers, sign me up.
Now, one thing I found super interested in your profile is that passion for journalism, which I share as well. Talk a little bit about your experience and maybe if there's anything that you've taken from that has still maybe helped you today.
Journalism is something that I'm really passionate about. In high school, I did the newspaper, I did the yearbook, and I really enjoyed those things. So when I went to college, I started doing radio. All through that time, I had a radio show every Thursday from 3 to 6. I was
That's
on the
awesome.
air, I was playing tunes and everything, and I really enjoyed that. I also did some magazine and some newspaper
Hmm.
work. I did transfer away from engineering to journalism because I was like, physics is hard. I mean, God bless all you physicists out there, people that are great at physics,
Hmm.
but that was the point where when physics came up in my curriculum, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to drop computer engineering.
That's
Oh, and I
awesome.
did some television too. Television was great. This was a campus student-run TV station, and we
Hmm.
had to do what we can. What I've learned through that is the ability to craft and to share a story. We, as engineers and developers and creators, we often have to share our ideas. If you're a visionary and you can see where you want to go and you want to bring somebody into your mission, you have to tell the story. You have to explain to them, like, hey, this is where we're starting. And this is sort
Hmm.
of the vision that I have for this project or this design or whatever it is. And this is where we're going to end up once we finish this process of getting through all these steps. If you can craft that story, then you can be successful in pretty much whatever you're doing. So
Even if you're a developer, you still need to be able to take those concepts and convince people that some of the stuff that you're doing is great.
we, as developers and engineers, some people may be watching this and considering to submit a proposal for a talk at a
Hmm.
conference. Same thing. Same preparation goes into it. Same
Hmm.
storytelling element goes into it. And the one, I guess, thing that I would offer as the caveat, and I can't remember who told this to me, but they said, never give a presentation for the first time.
Hmm.
And it's kind of mind blowing because you're like, how can I never give the presentation for the first time? It has to be a first time. Well, that means you've practiced it, you've
Right.
delivered it, you've studied it, and you've maybe shared it with some people.
Another thing that I found super cool is that you're very active with volunteering opportunities. So talk a
Yeah.
little bit about how volunteering and networking has helped your career.
It doesn't matter where you are in your career, what path, what career you're in, you can't do it by yourself. You have to have a network. I've always been a fan of building networks. As a kid, I was in the Boy Scouts. I did Toastmasters.
I could
Um,
totally see all these things in you. Yeah.
I had a lot of fun on teams in high school, and so I've always been a fan of giving back to communities that invest in you. Outside of that, I've also given back to other organizations in my community. I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. I'm also a member of Blacks in Technology. I enjoy taking my time and my talent and giving back to the community. As I was a child growing up, there were so many people that invested in me as an
Hmm.
individual. It's only my responsibility to continue that and invest in other people around my community and help them level up in whatever way I can.
Most of the jobs that you get in your career, you get from somebody that has experience working with you.
I am totally happy just sitting here in my office, So when I am in spaces where I have the opportunity to connect with people, I try to break out of my shell
Hmm.
and go that extra mile to introduce myself or to talk to people or to ask questions. But there are opportunities, and when I have those opportunities, I try my hardest to just kind of break out of the shell and do what I can to make those connections.
I think something weird happens when you go to an event where everybody is like you. My wife one time was dropping me off somewhere and she looked at all the people in the conference and she was like, "Look, it's a bunch of nerds just like you, honey." I'm like, "Okay, great." It's easier like when you meet somebody like you to start talking about things that you're passionate about. I think that you have a lot of courses that anybody could get a lot out of. I really loved your DevOps tips course. So I love this video that you did on upskilling your team. So important. I've talked to a lot of people in the industry who own companies who can't find developers, and
Yeah.
that's one thing that I bring up. Well, what are you doing with the people that you have, right? What do you recommend employers and employees do to encourage this kind of upskilling?
The benefit for management in those situations is that they usually have people, but maybe those people don't have the skills that they need to
Hmm.
solve a particular problem, that they're trying to face. Maybe it's not as fast as if you hire a contractor, but the difference is that person who's already there, they know your business, they know your clients, they know your customers, so they kind of know how to make things work. If all they need is this one particular skill, be it programming or Excel or Photoshop, whatever it is, they can learn that on the job. Or if you
Hmm.
give them space to learn it, they can learn it on their own. Or go to training and learn it that way. So that way, when they come back with those skills, or as they're infused with those skills, number one, they have that skill now, and number
Hmm.
two, they still have all the same experience that they've had leading up to that point. And so they know how to get that purchase order through after they've developed this process to automate the whole thing. Whereas if you hire that contractor, you're going to suffer from a ramp up time. There are trade-offs in both cases, but I feel like when you upskill, you just instill more.
Great culture, I think, right? Those kind of people tend to stick around too because they know that it's not just what they're doing today, but that they have value as the company grows.
Exactly, and that's the word I was looking for. It's that cultural change that you say, like, "Hey, we're together. We are committed to each other to solve this problem, to do this thing that we call work."
Yeah, another tip that I love was your concept of using ChatOps to improve how you interact with meetings. I go to so many meetings that are just so boring. So this is really great. Can you talk about the things that you're doing maybe before and after a meeting that other people aren't doing that could be really beneficial?
If you have a note taker, somebody that's taking notes, so you have this thread that's sort of capturing these highlights from the meeting, you can refer
Hmm.
to that after the meeting as an artifact. Beforehand, you might want to share some ideas, some highlights to let people know, like, hey, this is what we really need to hit on in this meeting, so that people are ready to dive
A
in.
developer finds ways of streamlining anything, like even a meeting. What else can you automate or streamline, and how can you use leverage the fact that you know how to do shell scripts?
Transcript in that. That's totally cool. Where you can just like, oh wait, what did I say in that meeting 3 weeks ago? Well, let me just pull
That's
up the
right.
transcript. Oh, there it is, right there at 3 p.m. I said XYZ.
One of the biggest things that's happening now in the industry is a move to cloud coding.
One thing I like about the GitHub CodeSpaces approach, considering that you can have a code space for every different project that you're working on, and all of them are configured differently. With maybe one project that you're looking at is JavaScript heavy, and then you flip and you're working on a project that has to do with infrastructure, and now you're totally dialed in to work with Terraform or CloudFormation. That might be harder to do on your desktop. You're sort of flipping between these plugins that are installed. On top of that is AI and code generation. It comes with some controversy because people are
Mhm.
like, oh, where are you getting this code from? Automated code generation is the next step for this developing on the cloud. It can help enable people who, number one, who are learning programming languages, and number two, it can expedite the programming that people who are experienced with the language. So for the people who are learning, they might not know what a for loop looks like in Rust, for example.
Mhm.
They can take a for loop, they hit tab or return or whatever, and they've got the for loop, and they can start to fill in the blanks. Like, okay, that's what it looks like. Or maybe it saves them time because they don't have to reach for documentation. For the experienced designer, they could probably fly through a design. Maybe they can do what they did in a day in an hour now. And just think about how that multiplies their time. So now they've got project one that maybe it took them a week to knock out. they're knocking that out in a couple days, and then they could pick up project two, and now they're knocking out 2 projects in a week. Automated code generation is going to be key for everybody who's coding.
Think about when you begin a project, what are you doing? You clone the repo locally, then you npm install, then you like build. I have the shirt that says, in case of fire, git commit, git push, and get out. Because it is a cloud environment, everything that you're doing is being stored for you in memory. When I have to go to the office, I get really nervous because I start wondering, did I push? Did I commit? Did I forget? Because you're like not committed something and then you go somewhere and it's not there anymore. Whatever I do on my machine at home is already done in my machine at work. Yes. And it really blows your mind.
You can be on any platform now and look at your code. Say you started a project on your laptop, and then you go to another computer and you have to configure that environment. You pull down the code and now you're all set. With something like a CodeSpace, you could start on your laptop. You could switch to your phone while you're on the train or whatever. You get to the office, maybe you pick up a tablet, and now you can look at your code in a tablet. All that device is now is just like a terminal. It's like a portal to get to where the stuff is. When you're onboarding somebody to an established project, I mean, think about all the times that you've joined a team or started working on something and you're like, okay, give me the repo. Okay, I got the repo. What tools do I need locally? Oh, you got to install this. You got to install this. Oh, you also got to configure this to do X, Y, Z. So then you change, your whole local configuration to run this one project. And I mean, How long does that take? And then, God forbid, you have to switch. Somebody says, hey, can you help me on this other project? And you're like, yeah, I can help you out. So then you start to work on that project. And they're like, oh, wait, you can't use that version of MySQL locally. You have to use this other version. You're like, if you're working in a code space, you could say, well, okay, I'm new to the team. How do I get started? Well, all you do is you go to this web page and you click this button that says launch your environment. Boom, you got it. You're up and running. You can start coding right away. Somebody taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, help me with project number 2. Okay, cool. How do I get started? Well, you go to this web page and you see how it just kind of saves all this time.
Yeah, I think I just have to get through the uneasiness. It's sort of like when I did Google Docs and I'm like, where's the save? Like, how come I can't file save? You're not going to miss the fact that you have the wrong version of NPM installed. Speaking of GitHub, you've also done some courses on GitHub Actions. Do you think that it can deliver a robust enough experience right now?
A key benefit of GitHub Actions is it's all in one system on one platform on GitHub versus some other platforms where you have to integrate through webhooks or API keys or pushes or whatever it takes to get system B connected to GitHub, which is system A. The biggest thing though is the fact that you can use actions to automate just about anything in GitHub. If somebody joins your team and they clone your repo, you could set up an action that says, hey, welcome to our team. There's so many different ways that you can automate the interactions with GitHub because all of these triggers, all of these events are exposed to you as a person who's using GitHub Actions. And that will be much harder to do in a framework, automation framework that's not exposed to all of these things that GitHub offers as a platform.
It's not necessarily that GitHub Actions is the most robust thing, is that you have all your security keys, you have dependency tracking. So another course that I think everybody should watch is this course that you did on nailing your DevOps interview. For somebody who's thinking about a career switch into DevOps, what do you think makes a great DevOps engineer?
The 2 key tenets of DevOps are, the communication and the people. I could build the best CI/CD pipeline for a hello world application, and it would be amazing, right? But if I don't understand the need for that automation, if I don't understand the people and the processes that will depend on that automation, then my super glamorous hello world, deployment process.
I do love that it's a hello world, though.
Yeah, it's not, that's the thing. If you give an engineer enough time and enough compute power, they're going to build a palace, right? You like, well, what's the app? Oh, it prints hello world. Well, I guess what? We're going to have linting. We're going to have, we're going to run tests.
That's right. That's right.
It's going to be amazing. But if you don't have a connection with the people and the processes that are dependent on your automation, that's the biggest part of DevOps. Just knowing why, the why part, like why do we need to develop this? What's important about this,
Mm.
and what's the benefit of making this build faster? What's the benefit of automating this particular process? And once you learn those things, that's the enlightened DevOps engineer, I think.
That's great. I did love that you actually mentioned that if you're thinking of maybe changing careers to DevOps, simply just deploying to cloud services would be a
Yeah.
great start.
If you talk with creatives and you talk with developers, the creative will have the idea like to describe the website. And that developer, they're going to help them take it to the next level. They're going to pull in the proper JavaScript framework. You need somebody that can say, okay, I can take this design and I can put it online where it's serviceable, where people can get to it, where it's secure, because security is such a big piece of what we do.
Mhm.
It's going to be performant. It's going to have automated checks. Maybe it'll have self-healing. And that's where
Mhm.
like the ops side kind of comes to bear. But you are just like that much more ahead of your peers if you can say, okay, I've got this application and now I can put it into a place where other people can look at it and I can collect metrics from that
Mhm.
and get feedback on it and improve on it. And that's where that sort of that DevOps cycle, comes into play.
Servers are back. They're becoming a more important part of the pipeline. That sort of phase that we went through where we were pre-rendering everything and pushing it up, all that's being now handled by the cloud. Talk about what the opportunities are like in DevOps, especially with the current challenges in the industry.
I think the next big thing is going to the edge. And by edge
Mhm.
computing, I mean running processes in the cloud, but not necessarily in data centers, but even further out so that they're closer to mobile devices. They're closer to your browser. They can send you data faster. If you're a developer and you're thinking about mobile design, knowing how the next generation of that is going to look.
There is a lot of opportunities for people who understand that. If you look at the frameworks that we're seeing right now, they're edge computing based frameworks. If you have those skills and understand some of these things that are happening, then you're going to be ready for the future. Where can somebody find what you're up to?
I think LinkedIn is the best place to get a hold of me and to learn what I'm doing. I am also on Twitter at Managed Chaos. That's
Mhm.
KAOS.
Well, thank you so much for the interview. I really, really appreciate it. I know that I'm going to be one of those people that is just going to be waiting for your show to start. I can't wait to see what you come up with.
Yeah, I'm also looking forward to it. So thanks for that push, and I can't wait to interact with the folks that are watching this. I really want to continue to have that relationship by sharing what I feel is interesting to me with people that share the same interests as well.